Welcome to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast, the show for people who are ready to break out of survival mode in order to build a truly thriving life. I'm Amanda Solman, and along with Mark Jewell, my co-host and the founder and CEO of Mark Jewell Speaking and Training, we break down common roadblocks that keep people stuck surviving and share ideas to help you thrive each and every day. On this week's episode, Wade and I talk about what to do when you feel like you're thriving but don't want to lose that momentum. Everything that feels great will normalize over time if you don't keep putting your foot on the gas pedal. Our conversation will give you some tips to do just that. So let's head over to the show. Wade, welcome back to this week's episode. Glad to have you on.
Thank you, Amanda. This will be fun.
Awesome. So Wade, you and I are going to talk about a process that we use here for really keeping up momentum, which we call appreciate, celebrate, accelerate. But before we dig into that, I want to take a step back because that process is actually kind of a sub-process within our Survivor's Guide to Thriving process. I just said the word process a lot. Apparently it is the word of the day. So I just want to kind of take a step back and recap that. So if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you have heard about the Survivor's Guide to Thriving and the 7 steps to go from surviving to thriving in any behavior. But it's been a little while, so I just kind of want to walk us through those real quick. So the first step in that process is survival. So that's where maybe you've gotten a little complacent, maybe you've got some unknown potential. You don't know what you're capable of. So you're sort of settling for just fine. And then what will inevitably happen is that you have a discovery moment. So maybe all of a sudden you discover what you're capable of, or maybe you see something you want, right? So maybe there's an object or a lifestyle or a career position that you see that you want. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, things don't have to be just fine. I could have more. And so that's your discovery moment. But then what inevitably happens the minute you have your discovery moment is that you slide into suffering because you know what's possible, but you don't have it quite yet. So those are our first 3 steps: survival, discovery, and suffering. Now is where the change happens. You either get to stay in suffering or stay in survival mode, or you get to put in the next step, which is the appropriate effort. And that is the work that's got to be done to actually get the thing you want, right? You had that discovery moment. You were like, hey, I want that. And now you've got to put in the work to get there. What's really cool that happens is that when you put in that appropriate effort, you start to awaken, you start to feel good, you start to just get excited about all the new things you're accomplishing. So maybe you've been putting in that workout and you're seeing your body change, or maybe you've been working really hard on a project and you start to get positive feedback from a coworker or a boss, right? So you just start to awaken to all of these awesome feelings. And then what happens is, because you feel awesome, you put in more of that appropriate effort. You keep going to the gym. You keep working hard on your projects, and you get into this state of momentum that we call thriving. Now, we got survival, discovery, suffering, appropriate effort, awakening, and thriving. And it sounds awesome getting to thriving. But Wade, I don't know about you, but I often hear from clients that they're like, oh, things are going great. This is awesome. I'm done. Right? And what can happen is that if you're not careful, thriving will slide back into either suffering or survival because we get complacent. We think, oh, things are going awesome. I don't have to keep putting in the work. But if we're going to keep thriving in the long term, it comes the last step in the process, which is what we call transcendence. And so that is really about maintaining that momentum in thriving for the long term. And this is where appreciate, celebrate, accelerate comes in, is in this transcendence state. So I know that was a super quick recap of the process. If you want to learn more about each step, again, I really encourage you to go back to those first few episodes of the podcast, because Mark and I broke down every single one of those steps in really deep detail. But just to kind of bring us to where we're going to talk about today, we are talking about that transcendence step, that step that you've got to put the work in so that you don't slide backwards from all the progress you've been making in the meantime. So all that being said, Wade, Where do you want to go next in this conversation?
So I want to dig into the why behind why when you are thriving, you're eventually going to slide back down the pyramid. So I take it back to the customer experience. So just think of yourself as the consumer, and are your expectations higher today than they were 5 years ago? I think in every case, we're going to say, yes, our expectations are higher. And so in the next 5 years, our expectations are going to be even higher, whatever that experience is. And the same goes for our customers. So we have to level up, because doing what got us here will not take us to that next level, and we'll slide back down the pyramid.
Absolutely. I always think of like, a lot of people will come to us when they have been working out for a while, right? And the workout that they were doing, they were like, oh my gosh, right? Like I lost all of this weight, or I'm building all this muscle, or I'm just feeling awesome. And then they'll come to us, I don't know, 4, 6 weeks later, and they're like, well, I've been doing the same thing, but now like I'm plateaued, right? You always hear that in the fitness world, like I've hit a plateau. And that's because we haven't transcended, right? We're doing what
Right.
it took to get this far, but we haven't kept up that momentum or changed things. And so when we talk about appreciate, celebrate, accelerate, and we're going to break down each of these pieces, it really is the three things that are going to take us into the next level.
Yeah, I mean, Mark has been doing this 90-day process for the last 4 years. So he's, on I think round 16 or 17 of setting 90-day goals. And he went to Mick Doyle, who a lot of you have gotten to know over the last couple of years, and just asked Mick, what should I do for a fitness goal? I've hit all my goals up to this point. What's next? And Mick's response, I can get you a fight. And there you go. Now Mark has a fight on the calendar next month.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. And I think we can apply that in any case. I think we talk a lot about fitness goals because sports is such a great analogy to life lessons, right? So it's I think why we jump there so quickly. But that same thing happens at work. I mean, think about how excited you are when you first graduate from college and you get your first new job. You're like, yes, I'm on top of the world. I am accomplishing everything. I'm hustling. I'm doing the work, compared to, after you've been in that role 2, 3, 5 years, right? And it's not quite as exciting if you haven't given yourself that chance to level up. Or, same thing when you get a new promotion, or same thing when you, maybe you and your spouse go and do something new together, and it's like, oh, this is so cool. And then if you don't add those new things, that variety in an ongoing way, like things just kind of settle back into a norm. And so this idea applies in so many different situations, to your point, because what got us here before is not what's going to keep getting us there moving forward. So, Wade, let's dig into this idea, right? We've said it multiple times here. Appreciate, celebrate, accelerate. What the heck does that mean? So let's start with the first one. Wade, why is appreciate and appreciations a part of this transcendence leveling up process?
Yeah, great question, Amanda. So when we get on our first coaching call, or one thing that I like to do is start off each of my coaching calls with, what are you appreciating today? And it's kind of funny, really, because a lot of times the response is kind of a deer in the headlights look, like, wait a minute, we're here to talk about what are we appreciating today? And so, I like to ask the question, okay, let's think of 3 things. How about one for work, one outside of the work, and the third one's up to you? And typically when we start off, it's things like the weather. I appreciate my family, and it's very surface level. And so I ask people to dig in. Okay, so specifically, what do you appreciate about your family? And dig into a deeper level in those questions. And then we ask the question, so why are we asking about what are you appreciating here today? And people come up with, various forms of these answers. And it is, to set the tone, kind of set a positive mood to the call. It makes us feel good. But the one that I enjoy the most is, it's impossible to be in a pissy mood when we are appreciating things. And so taking time to just stop and what are we feeling good about today? What are the wins? What are we feeling good about? And just kind of digging into them and not allowing the surface level answers, it makes people turn inward and really get more real with themselves.
Yeah, I definitely do not think we do enough of this in our professional lives. But to be really honest, I don't know that we do enough of this in our personal lives either. Like, a lot of folks who are listening to this, a lot of folks we work with, we're good, Midwestern, rural, so we got manners, right? So we say please and thank you from an appreciation standpoint when we're out, and somebody holds a door for us, we say thank you. Right? But and not that people in other parts of the country don't. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't make it sound like that. But I think a lot of times you can think of appreciation from a manners and politeness standpoint. And I don't know that we always take the time to really use appreciation from a deep, get real with people standpoint, right? So often, I think you used this week or this example a week or so ago when we had you on the show where one of your clients said, my wife did this thing that was really nice for me. And you said, well, did you tell her you appreciate that? And he was like, oh, no, I just know, right? And so like we need to remember to show appreciation in our personal life, not just at work where, yes, obviously appreciations are often missing professionally, but like we could do a better job personally of making sure the people in our lives know those things as well.
Yeah, I believe that there are no coincidences in life. And I don't believe that it was any coincidence that I just listened to a podcast in the last 5 days. And the speaker was saying 7 billion people went to bed last night and 6.9 billion of them felt underappreciated when they went to sleep. Like, wow, that just hit home and exactly right. We say please, we say thank you, but specifically, what are we saying thank you about? And really getting specific about the feedback. That's really what people appreciate rather than just simply saying the word. Well, I told them thank you. Yes, you did, but did you mean it? Did you make eye contact? The little details, those are things that make a difference in people's life.
Yeah, it's funny how much just the change in the language that you use can have an impact on how it feels, right? So it's one thing to say, hey, thanks for talking with me. It's a whole different thing to say, I really appreciate that you took time out of your schedule to give me this feedback on where I'm going with my career. Like one just sounds so much more heartfelt maybe than the other. And I don't know if it's just how I associate emotion with those terms, but I think to really say like I appreciate fill in the blank versus just hey, thanks for fill in the blank. There's some deeper about it
Mm-hmm.
that I think comes with the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah, and I know we've cited her here numerous times, but listening to another Brene Brown podcast here this morning, and she talked about living a wholehearted life. And I think that's a very genuine way to look at it. And how do we live, live within ourselves and be our authentic self? But what does that look like in terms of showing vulnerability and being courageous in what we share?
Yeah. So I want us to talk about a few examples here of what appreciation really looks like in real life. So we've talked about, why it's important to show appreciation, and how you might do that. But I want to just kind of take a step back and talk about how this has shown up for some of the folks I've worked with. So one example that really has come to my mind as the power of appreciations is I have had a couple of different clients who they'll come to their coaching calls and they'll be like, man, I'm really struggling with this coworker of mine, right? I can't seem to connect with them. They're not super friendly. Like they're always short and grumpy with me and I just can't figure it out. And I kind of turn it back and say, so when was the last time you went to that person and showed appreciation versus you went to that person with a problem they needed to fix? And you just sort of see the realization come across their face like, oh, I do only bring problems to them. And so it's like, well,
Right.
in what world do you want to be the person that someone only comes to when they've got a problem to fix, right? There's always negative energy around that. You always are trying to bail them out, or they're bailing you out, or somebody's not happy somewhere, right? Like, who wants to always be associated as being the person who has to solve all the negative problems? What would happen if you started making a conscious effort to go to that person and say, hey, I really appreciate the extra hour you spent on that project for me last night. Or I really appreciate that, you brought this skill to the conversation that really helped us work through this challenge with the customer. Or I really appreciate that you always seem to know just how to talk to that person, right? What if we came to them with that appreciation language versus only coming to them with problems to fix? And some of these clients have really tried to incorporate that, and they'll come back the next week and say, oh my gosh, they were so much more positive. They were so much more willing to help me. And it's like, yeah, because that is the power of appreciation. And I think too often in our work settings, problem solving, putting out fires is all we do. And it's easy to create just this negative story when it feels like there is no positivity. And to your point earlier, appreciation carries an inherently positive vibe that needs to be weaved into not just, I think you can talk at a culture level, and I think you might even dig in there, but even just at a one-on-one level, making sure that you're interjecting that positive energy, which appreciation is so good at a lot of the times.
Right, exactly. So it's like the customer that we only go out and talk to when it's time to book the deal. Or it's like the parent who we call only when we need something, or the friend that we, only call when there's something in it for us. And I think we all have relationships like that. And so you know what that feels like. And essentially, it's pretty lonely at the top. But a lot of times the general managers, the vice presidents and division heads, they don't hear about what's going right. And so we need to bring it to their attention and celebrate the wins, which we'll get into next. But I really love the statement, what we focus on expands. And so if we're looking for what's right or we're looking for what's wrong, we will find it. And so make sure that the conversation includes what's going right and who's doing well, where the successes are, so that we're feeling good about it and sharing that vibe. Or else it does just become about what do we have to do next.
Yeah. And Wade, I want to reiterate what you were saying there. Obviously, this is more from a professional side of the world. But I think we sometimes lose sight that in an effort to fix problems and put out fires, those folks at the top are the least likely to be hearing about the day-to-day wins, right? Because the only thing that gets elevated to them is the problem, right? They get the things that are above everyone else's pay grade. And so, especially if you're kind of a boots on the ground type person, frontline type person, or if you're kind of that middle management that's reporting upwards, really be cognizant of figuring out how you can weave appreciation and positivity into those conversations with your division heads, with your CEO, with your general manager. Because if you're not sharing it with them, it's probably not getting to them, and they need to feel appreciated and also feel as though good things are happening, not just problems and fires. And that's again, we're weaving together some different topics, but that's really one of those managing up skills that can be really important in an organization, and what ultimately will help create the culture that trickles back down, right? So if that person at the top is both feeling appreciated and feeling a sense of positivity, they can trickle that back down, but that's also got to come up through the ranks as well. So just some things to think about on the professional side of the world as to why appreciation is so important.
Yeah, I think we all know, especially, I don't want to just pigeonhole this approach, but there are a lot of older managers, older leaders who have the philosophy, if I don't call you, that's a good thing. So if you don't hear anything from me, you're doing fine. And that approach might have been how they were brought up, but that's not going to work for anyone else in this industry or in any industry really. So we need to tell our story. We need to make sure that we're highlighting where we had successes, because if I don't tell my story, if I don't tell the story for my team, who will? No one will. And so we have to bring those things to their attention so that they get to celebrate and feel good about what's going on within their company as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to bring this back to one of the other topics that I know we've talked about in the past, which is the 6 basic human needs. And one of those human needs is significance, right? Everyone has a need to feel important to somebody. And appreciation is one of the most important ways to make someone feel significant. And if you're a manager, if you are in HR, you know the importance of retention and holding on to good employees. And I will say this right now, if people do not feel appreciated, if they do not feel important, they have zero incentive to be loyal, to stick, to stick with your company or that job. And so if you're facing retention issues, I mean, obviously there could be a lot of things going into that, but one little self check for you is, am I showing people, am I telling people that they are appreciated and that they are an important part of this organization? Because if I am not, that might be at least a contributing factor to why people aren't sticking around, because people inherently want to be a part of something that makes them feel special and makes them feel valued. So just kind of a way to weave together a couple of different topics here. Wade, I also wanted.
People don't always. People don't always remember what you say. They always remember how you made them feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like you have to weave that phrase into like every podcast episode, because I think it came up last week when Mark and I were talking. So,
I've got 3 phrases, Amanda, so that's I'm tapped out.
I always I constantly will say something and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like one of those quotables that goes on like an Instagram post somewhere. Like it's just one of those things. Wade, I wanted to also kind of take a different angle on this appreciations topic. So, we talked a lot about appreciating the people around you that helped you get to where you are, right? So on the journey from surviving to thriving, there are always people who played a contributing factor in helping you get there. So making sure that you are appreciating them. But the other piece of this is, I think, there's a level of appreciation for the lessons you've learned along the way and the experience that you've gained along the way, right? So there's something that could say, oh, if I'm leveling up, it's because what I did wasn't good enough. But the reality is what you did got you to where you are. So let's appreciate that. So I often think, when people are like, oh my gosh, what do I do next? Well, the first thing is like, let's take a look back. Like, what did you learn in the last, if we use our 90-day framework, like what did you learn in the last 90 days that helped you actually get to where you can now say what's next? Because 90 days ago, you weren't here. So what did I learn? What did I experience? What were some of the fears and limiting beliefs that I overcame? And you know what? I'm going to take a pause and just say, I am so appreciative of those. Or you know what? I'm so appreciative of the really tough stuff that I went through, whatever, in the last 90 days, the last 6 months, the last year, because I would not be here today if I had not gone through the tough stuff. I've got some clients right now who are just like, man, I talked to some of these 30-year career vets and I'm just like, I wish that I knew as much as them, or I wish that it came as easily as it does for them. And we have to stop and take a pause and say, those folks are only as successful as they are today because they went through the crap, they went through the tough stuff that you're going through right now. So you have to pause and be thankful for the tough stuff, because you will never be what they are if you don't go through what you're going through now. And it's just a really great perspective check that, sometimes in order to get to the good, you got to go through the crappy. And you can be appreciative of the crappy stuff because it will make the good stuff so much better on the other side.
Yeah, when you think back on, some negative experience, and it doesn't matter if it's, early in your childhood or later on in your professional life, but instead of looking at it as, that negative experience, I wish that didn't happen or that shouldn't have happened, and you start to just kind of regret what happened. Flip that around, and you wouldn't be who you are today had you not gone through that. So look for the gift or the lesson in each and every experience. And when you do that, that's how you, in my mind, that's how you transcend those negative experiences.
Absolutely. It's also how you keep yourself from, I think maybe falling back into old patterns of like self-pity or wallowing. I think when we don't appreciate the bad stuff, that's when we are most susceptible to kind of feeling that self-pity. And not that, and again, I always feel like we have to say, not that you shouldn't feel your feelings, like be sad when things are tough, be frustrated when things are tough. It's okay. Like that's the range of human emotion. But if you want to expedite the timeline through which you work through those things, I think appreciation has to be a critical part of that, because otherwise that's how grudges happen. That's how just continuing to
Mm-hmm.
wallow in the negative emotions happens, is that we continue to live in the negativity instead of saying, you know what, thanks for that. It was tough. It sucked. I don't want to do it again, but I am much stronger. I am smarter. I know more now so that I can avoid it in the future. And that's what is going to allow you to move on. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, that's one thing, in conversations at work or even outside of work, where you are with somebody who is complaining, or you're complaining to them, instead of complaining about what's going on or what's wrong. Okay, that is the situation. Now, what am I going to do with it? So, I'm sure I've used this one before, but this is the hand I've been dealt. How am I going to play this?
Yep. And it's funny that, we're talking about negativity here when we're also talking about transcending and leveling up. But the reality is sometimes we have to learn how to leave those things that are in the past behind in order to take it to the next level. And that requires being appreciative of what they've given us, but not holding on to them as we move forward into whatever the next stage is. So I think that's really important. Wade, any other thoughts on appreciation here?
Yeah, I think it's just important to note, what percent of the time are you spending talking about what's right versus what's wrong, or what do we have to do? I know, I've had the opportunity to be a part of a couple different staff meetings, that kind of level where we're spending 8 hours in a conference room talking about here's where we're at and what needs to happen next. And I'll just say about 90+% of it is spent on what do we have to do, what do we have to fix, what's wrong, who needs to be held accountable, all those things. And then the last 5 to 10% is, well, at the very end, if there's time, then we'll talk about what's going right. And we have to flip that somehow, because if we're going to focus on what's wrong or what do we have to do, we're going to get more of it. And so if we can flip that and start to highlight and feel good about what's going right, that's when we're going to start to see more of it in all areas of life.
Absolutely. Again, what you focus on expands. So true for so many things. So appreciation is the first step of our transcendence process. The next step is what we call celebrate or celebration. And so, Wade, why is the celebration step so important to transcending into the next level?
Yeah, when people hear the word celebrate or celebration, we think about money. We think about, we have to throw a party, or we have to provide an incentive or reward. And we're not even talking about that. We're just recognizing what went well and what we're feeling good about. It's interesting. I, work very closely with the vice president of agronomy, and we've come a long ways on this. But initially, when I brought up the appreciate, celebrate, accelerate conversation, his feedback for me was, man, I really suck at celebrating. We're so focused on getting things done and what's next. And we just burn ourselves out. If we don't take time to feel good about what we've got accomplished and look for what's right, we're going to get to the end of our career or the end of life and not realize what all went on that we should have been enjoying at the present moment. So taking time to recognize and feel good about what's going right is critically important. And it's important to model for yourself. It's important to model for your families and for your teams. Because, I train people how to treat me. And so if I am recognizing people, guess what? They're going to start recognizing people around them too. And it's an attitude that is contagious. So make sure that we are modeling the right behaviors for the people around us.
Definitely. You and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I think one of the reasons that a lot of us don't celebrate, one, I think there's almost like a cultural thing around it. Like if I celebrate or if I pat myself on the back or if I pat you on the back, that we've somehow lost, being humble, right? Like we just assume that we should do things right. And so that's why we always look for the faults, right? Is because we assume that doing things right is the norm and doing things wrong is the exception. And so we have to fix the exception so that we're always doing things right. But the reality is like, you're not hurting your humility by saying, hey, you did an awesome job at that. Or, hey, I succeeded in this today. Or, hey, we got the house cleaned in like under an hour. Go us, like high five, right? There, that's totally cool to do. And it just gets you feeling really positive. And so I think anytime that you can weave in those accomplishments and calling them out, it like don't feel like you're selfish for celebrating the wins. I think it's really an important part of this process. So one of the other things that I think becomes really important about celebrating the wins is that a lot of times we spend our energy trying to fix the things that don't go well, when if we would take a moment to celebrate the wins, to celebrate what went well, we might find more often those things that we could capitalize on, right? So instead of just fixing the broken stuff, where can we say, oh my goodness, this worked really well. Where else can I apply this? Or how can I do more of this in the future? But if we're not taking time to celebrate the wins, to recognize the right behavior, we're also missing out on an opportunity to really capitalize on that and take that further. So that's just for me, it's like, hey, let's recognize the successes in order to make more of them in the future. So I know that you have had some good experience with clients, I guess good or bad, trying to incorporate more celebration into their lives, whether professionally or personally. So what has that looked like on your end of the world?
Yeah, let's see. So in terms of, recognizing the right behaviors, when people feel like they're being recognized, they're going to do more of those said behaviors. So maybe it's doing a grill out for the operations team, or maybe it's sending a text message, hey, great job. We have a CEO who does a fantastic job of just sending a note to somebody, hey, your truck looks awesome. So when he does that, guess what? The truck driver is going to be a lot more apt to clean his truck the next time, because he was recognized for those right behaviors. And so just it doesn't take anything monetary. In fact, I think when we think that it takes something monetary, we are making a big, big mistake. It's kind of interesting, Amanda. I had a team I was leading here about 7-8 years ago, and I had just read something about how to recognize people doing the right things. And so I just sent out a generic questionnaire, just asking them, when you do something well, do you like time away? Do you like, quality time with your spouse or significant other? Do you like monetary? And do you like being recognized in front of your peers? And I got some really good feedback from that. But what was interesting about it was we had a tradition, or I had something where every time we signed up a new client, I sent out an email to the team just recognizing the consultant for signing up this client. Here's their situation. Here's what their farm looks like. Way to go. Congratulations. And one of the people on my team told me, he said, I really, recognition in front of my peers, that does not light me up. That was the lowest on his questionnaire results. But he said he signed up a new client, and he said, I couldn't believe how many times I checked my email to see if you had sent out the recognition yet. And so for him and for myself, we both had a big aha moment that, you know what, that stuff does make a difference. Whether we, talk about it or not, people do, enjoy getting recognized. And so finding ways to do that, you're going to get more of the right behaviors when you lean into that practice.
Yeah, I want to just kind of re-highlight how important it is to know what lights up each individual person, right? So, maybe that person didn't even realize how much they enjoyed getting that shout out. But he might have even said, hey Wade, I just need you to come and tell me good job on signing that, right? Like I don't need an email to the whole team. I just need you to tell me, hey, awesome, right? So I think recognition can show up in a lot of different places, but what I think is most interesting is that he maybe thought he didn't really need it, but it did feel good to be recognized.
And so on that, Amanda, it was really cool to see how he started to practice that behavior more and more with the people around him. So if somebody else on the team did something well, he'd send a note or make a phone call, and he would start to recognize them as well because he figured out what it meant to him. And so he started to practice that behavior with others.
Yeah, it's like a snowball. I heard that analogy somewhere, like one person starts doing it and then it just keeps on rolling downhill in a good way, and building up momentum in that direction for sure.
Somebody had at the bottom of their email, attitudes are contagious. Make sure yours is one that's worth catching.
Mm.
And I think attitudes are contagious, both good and bad. That's actually a conversation I had with my son yesterday as he was going off to baseball. And so we talk about, what attitude are you going to choose today? And that's something that, attitudes are a choice. So, or am I going to have a great attitude, or am I going to just go through life and take it as life hands it out to me?
Yeah, definitely. And it's true in so many different cases. So any other thoughts on celebration and celebrating the wins?
Yeah, I encourage people, especially during the busy season. We're recording this now, and we're about out of the toughest part of spring for the agronomy guys. But for sales managers in particular, just look for try to catch people doing things right. So, when you can catch somebody doing something right and give them that instant feedback, that's when you really got something. That's when you are going to get more of it. And so, but you have to seek it out. You have to take time to look for it. And it doesn't take a lot of time, but just sending a note or a quick phone call or, way to go and a high five, it's really all it takes to get more of what you want.
And that reminded me of something I was thinking about earlier during this celebration conversation is remember that it's not just your peers and the people above you who deserve to have a celebration moment or who deserve, going back to our earlier topic, to have appreciation and significance thrown their way. Who are those people who maybe are in an administrative role or who you don't interact with on a day-to-day basis, but who are like, if they're not doing their job, yours becomes that much harder. Or, obviously we work a lot in agribusiness. Who are those folks out in the yard who are making sure that, things are getting delivered on time and that everything, all your equipment is working and that your customers are happy. And, those folks who are going out and doing some custom work that keeps your people operating at a high level, right? So just remember that I don't know, for whatever reason, I think sometimes when we think about more transactional type roles in an organization, we forget that those people want and deserve and have things to want and deserve appreciation and deserve to celebrate their wins as well. And so I feel like you've had some experiences, or maybe this was Mark, where somebody was in an organization that had very seasonal help, right? And so it was hourly work, and they were losing those people or not being able to hold on to those people, which I think is always a challenge, especially out in rural communities, is finding and holding on to talent. And they got talking about, are those people feeling appreciated? Do you celebrate their wins just as much as you celebrate your salespeople's wins? And they went, oh, no, I could probably stand to do a better job at appreciating and celebrating those folks. So just kind of, especially when the season is hard and the days are long, that can be the best time to make sure people know their value. So just kind of wanted to put a plug in for that idea as well.
Yeah, I remember one time just making a phone call, and I was just talking with the executive assistant. I was trying to connect with the general manager of this organization, and I just complimented her on the tone that she had. I said, you're really upbeat and friendly. I really enjoy calling and talking with you. And my goodness, you would have thought I gave her a $10,000 bonus. I mean, she was so lit up by that. And so guess what? Every time I called after that, boy, Wade moves to the front of the line now. And I'm not saying that to brag, but it was just interesting to me how something so small as just recognizing the tone in the voice all of a sudden just made a big shift in that person's day. So I look at this, you mentioned culture earlier, and I think, there is a lot to be said about the culture that you're creating. So if you are doing a great job with this, appreciating, celebrating, and accelerating, having those conversations, you're going to get more of the right behavior. So instead of just, looking at it, what is the bare minimum I have to do to get a paycheck? All of a sudden, when you start to recognize the right behaviors, people are going to take more ownership. There's going to be an extra pep in their step. They're going to be a lot more willing to go through the wall with you versus, you do it because I said so, that kind of thing. It's going to be a lot more sincere and sustainable. But there are cultures who are getting better at this, and guess what? They're attracting talent. And then there's other cultures where people left, not because, there was another dollar an hour down the road, but because I haven't been recognized in 6 months. Recognition is more than just an annual performance review. So we need to catch people doing the right things in the moment. And when we do, when the competition calls them up and says, hey, we have an extra dollar an hour if you come over here, they're not going to listen in a lot of cases because they love what they're a part of. And so, we talk about the 6 basic human needs and how critical that is. But, when you think about the basic needs, it's about connection and it's about significance. And what I'm doing is contributing to something bigger than myself, and I'm growing, I'm getting better. I mean, those are just 4 of the 6, and that's really, really important to recognize the right behaviors.
Absolutely. The other thing, I love that example that you shared about the admin who, when you just said, love how friendly you are on the phone, that just lit her up, right? I encourage people to pay attention to when you show appreciation or you celebrate a win, if the reaction from that person seems way bigger than you might think, it might be a good clue that they have not been feeling that in a while, right? So for Wade, for you to tell this lady, man, you're just so friendly. I love talking to you. For her to go, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, I know I haven't heard that in a while. Like, if that reaction seems a little bigger than maybe it should have been, that might be a clue that that person needs to hear a little more of that. I think of that with your spouse too. So we use this example a couple of weeks ago, Wade, but when you do something, right, you bring flowers home or you say thank you or whatever, and that person goes, oh my, like, whoa, what, like either, you're being nicer than normal. What's wrong? Or wow, thank you for doing that. I just can't believe it, right? If the reaction seems outsized, it might be a good clue that they haven't felt appreciated, or they haven't felt like their wins have been celebrated quite often enough. So pay attention to that too, because that might be a subliminal, subconscious hint that there's room for even more of that type of rewarding of good behaviors, or doing something nice, because they might need to feel that a little more.
Yeah, that exactly to that point. If you can remember a time somebody, and with a caller ID, you see their name come up, and what is the feeling that you feel when you see their name on the caller ID? Is it oh good, they're calling, or is it oh shit, now what happened wrong? And I think we all know people either way. And so I'm going to go back to from a leader perspective. How many times are we calling and contacting and reaching out to people to talk about what has to be done, and how much of the time are we talking about what's going right? So tell me, what's been the highlight of your week? What's been a win that you weren't expecting? Asking those types of questions, I think you're going to be amazed at the difference in the environment, in terms of what it's like to work there. When you take time to recognize people around you, that's when they go home and they tell their loved ones, man, I love working here. This was a great day. We got a lot done. I got a phone call from so-and-so. I got a text message from so-and-so. That's great. But how often do we hear that? It's such simple stuff, and it makes such a big difference. Yet it goes overlooked because we think we tell ourselves the story that I don't have time.
Definitely. So Wade, we have talked about kind of looking backwards and reflecting, right? So what was the things that got us from surviving to thriving in the first place? How can I appreciate the people who got me here? How can I appreciate the lessons and the experiences? And then how do I celebrate the wins? How do I celebrate, hey, this is awesome. I lost that weight that I wanted. Or, hey, it's awesome. I've gotten to the gym 3 days a week for the last 6 weeks straight. That's great. Or, hey, I hit my sales target. Or, hey, I have made date night a consistent routine, like whatever that is, celebrating those wins. So that's sort of the reflection part of this transcendence process. Now let's look forward. So now we're into the leveling up phase, and this is what we call accelerate. And that's really what it is, right? Like, this is pushing the gas pedal down a little bit further, moving just a little bit more, a little bit farther forward. So Wade, talk to me about accelerate. What does this mean? Why is it important?
Yeah, some of the greatest lessons in life are not what something is, but what something is not. Okay. So if somebody goes above and beyond, let's say they decide to stay late and they, just to meet this deadline. Okay. If we don't take time to recognize them and to celebrate the end result, that's the best way to stop that momentum and to say, to take it for granted or just assume that they understand that we appreciate it. That is going to kill that momentum, and they may stay late next time, but it's not going to be, living it out wholeheartedly like they did the first time. So if we don't do this, if we don't take time to appreciate them and tell them thank you sincerely, this was as a result of your hard work, it's the greatest momentum killer out there. So that's what it is not. So taking time to recognize and feel good about it and share more about what the end result is, that's how you're going to get more of the right behavior, whatever that is. And so, it's very simple stuff. I think we've covered enough of examples of how to do it, a text message, a phone call. I've heard even some creative ways. I know one sales manager who sends a thank you note to the spouse and recognizing them, through a card or a handwritten thank you note. That's something that, talk about going above and beyond. I mean, that is something that, the handwritten thank you notes, I think we all probably did that at one point in time, for a leadership training, maybe in college or something like that. But man, that is a lost art. and taking time to not just send a card, but to hand write it, man, that goes a long ways, and it makes a big difference in terms of separating yourself out from the competition, whatever that case might be.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many ways to take it to the next level, right? So to write somebody a handwritten thank you note, like that is, that's really leveling up. That's accelerating. I also think, not even just in the appreciation and the celebration parts of this that can be leveled up, but even thinking about, what was the actual goal in the first place, right? And so what does it mean to accelerate out of that actual goal in the first place? So let's say, man, I had a goal to create a workout routine where I was going to the gym 3 nights a week. And I've been doing that for 6 weeks straight, which is awesome. But if I'm going to keep leveling up, now I need to make that, maybe it's 4 days a week. Maybe it's 5 days a week. Maybe instead of only working out for 30 minutes, I'm going to try and work out for an hour, right? Or let's say, my original goal was to make a habit of date night. So once a week, I want to go out on date night. And so you appreciate, hey, we got it done. You celebrate, oh, we've got a better connection. And now the accelerate stage of that is, okay, maybe instead of one night a week, maybe I'm actually shooting for two. Or maybe this is what Mark and his wife do, right? So if for Mark to designate that date night a win, it's got to be like at least a 7 out of 10 or better, right? Like we got to really connect. We got to really have some fun. It can't just be, oh, we went out together, right? So like now he's set, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how good was the date night, right? There's always a way to level up. You brought up Mark's Muay Thai fight that he's doing here in a couple of weeks, right? That, he felt like he'd plateaued from a fitness standpoint. All right, new challenge. I'm going to go fight somebody. Or, like this last week, I ran a 10K for the very first time because, well, number one, I feel like I was crazy. I guess normal runners are like, that's not that far, but it felt really far for me. But again, I had done
That's
5Ks.
far.
And so the next step was a 10K, and that was the challenge to put the foot on the gas pedal and go a little further. So that acceleration, it is literally what we mean when we say level up, and it is going to vary depending on who you are. So, if you had a sales goal and you reach that sales goal, now it's time to level up. I know my husband's a salesman, right? And so his leveling up, it's always based on growth. So even if he grows sales in 1 year, there's no, if he wants to earn the incentives that come from the company, it's about leveling up again because we got to keep growing the business. So whatever that is for you, kind of imagine, all right, where I am is great, but what would it look like if I went just a little bit farther?
Yeah. So when I think of transcendence, I think about consistency. So it's not just taking action, but consistent action. Tony Robbins says it's not what I do once in a while that shapes our life, but what I do consistently. And that's really the difference in a lot of people. Everybody knows what they need to do, but very few of them are consistent in terms of the execution. But being intentional about creating the life that you want, and not just settling for what life happens to you. So I think the opportunity to lean into the results that you want is in every area of life. And when you think about, why do we set goals? We set goals to reach just a little bit higher. And because, if we like to use the 90-day goal, if we don't set goals, guess what? 90 days are going to go by, and we're going to look back and say, well, gosh, another 90 days went by. So we set a goal to reach for, be intentional about what we want to accomplish, and then take time to feel good about what you get done. So drop the judgment piece, and let's feel good about the weight that we did lose instead of the weight that we didn't in reaching for our goal.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that can come up for people sometimes in this stage is man, if I'm always pushing, right, nothing's ever good enough. I know I've found myself in this place where it's like, man, I wish, yeah, pushing to the next thing is awesome, but what if I get into a place where I'm just never happy? Because that's not fun either. And I think that's what's so critical about the appreciate and the celebrate stages. Like, I think most people, when we talk about leveling up, they only think about the accelerate. They only think about raising the bar. They only think about pushing to that next level. But incorporating that appreciation and that celebration, I think, is what makes this conversation so different, is that we're actually, it's not just about moving to the next step, but it is about reflecting back so that you can push forward more appropriately.
Wayne Dyer says, if I don't take time to appreciate what I have now, I won't appreciate it when I have more.
Mm. Mm-hmm. I think that's incredibly important. And the other thing too about this is the celebration and the appreciation are incredibly important from keeping you of feeling like nothing's ever good enough. But I think the acceleration is what is the critical piece to not fall back into complacency again. Right. Because that raising of the bar is the thing that keeps us from saying, what I'm doing now is fine. Because good will always become fine. Like it is inevitable. Good will always become fine if the bar is not raised again. So that's why, we talk about these three things as a set, because any one piece of them by themselves is not powerful enough to keep that momentum up. Right? If we're talking about thriving and transcendence as true momentum, just appreciations, just celebrating the wins, or just pushing the gas pedal hard enough, none of those will be the long-term solution. All three have to come together as a package in order to keep that momentum going. And I think that's also what's so powerful about them is, when they come as a package, they mean more than when they're just one-offs here and there.
Exactly right. Well said.
Perfect. So Wade, as we kind of wind down this conversation here, is there any resources or anything on the topic of appreciation, celebration, acceleration that you would recommend for folks who want to dig into this idea a little further?
I think so much of this goes back to attitude and what attitude do we choose. And for me personally, when I started to take in positive information, self-help, self-improvement, started to listen to different podcasts, read different books, then that's when my life shifted in all areas, personal and business, everywhere. So the old saying, garbage in, garbage out, if you're priming the pump with positive information and, we can do it type attitude, you're going to respond differently in whatever the situation is that comes up in life.
Perfect. I love it. So with that, everyone go make your motivational music playlist, get your books, go to YouTube. Positive in, positive out. Awesome. And
on that note, Amanda, I just want to say that, one thing that I really enjoy is when I see people in our network who are sharing those resources back and forth. They are seeing benefit in it themselves, and they start sharing with the MJST network. And that is really exciting. So please keep sharing the resources. We appreciate receiving them as well as sharing them.
Awesome. I love it. Again, it's that
did you see how I just appreciated the right behavior and celebrated the right behavior? That's how we're going to get more of it, Amanda.
Here you go. Application in action right here, man. Awesome. Well, Wade, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate your time and insight into this topic. And we look forward, man, we're on a roll here. So I'm sure that you are going to be back on here in no time.
Awesome. Look forward to it. We appreciate you too, Amanda. Thank you.
Thanks again to Wade for joining us on the pod this week. To connect with him further, just look for Wade Johannes on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Snapchat. If you like what you heard, make sure to jump over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. We appreciate the feedback, and it also helps other people find the show. As always, if you're looking for more resources to go from surviving to thriving, check out our website at www.markjewelltraining.com That's Jewell with 2 L's. And you can find us under Mark Jewell Speaking and Training on all the major social networks. Remember, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. See you next week.